Hey everyone, Jesse Shade from Awfully Good Movies here, and now that 2022 is officially in our rearview mirror, we can stop trying to make sense of whatever the hell that year was, and start making sense of the 10 movies you JoBlo readers helped us pick as the worst movies of 2022, with your votes in our end of the year poll tabulated against the IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes scores for each of the top 20 picks, which then get rearranged down to 10. Whether you suffered through these movies in a theater or on your tablet, whether or not Scorsese or Tarantino technically think they count as cinema, and just so long as they legally qualify as a movie more than that Pauly Shore Pinocchio does, then I say every one of these flicks smell of crap all the same. And no, Thor: Love and Thunder is not going on the list, which is not the same as saying that movie was a flawless piece of art. These are not the most disappointing movies of 2022 we're talking about, they are the worst movies, especially in the case of Jeepers Creepers Reborn.
Just look at all the lovely clowns.
Mom's gonna paint these streets with blood.
Stop it, please, I beg you! It's a sin! It's a sin!
So without further ado, JoBlo.com and Awfully Good Movies present the top 10 worst movies of 2022. Number 10, The Bubble. You know what I want to do now that we've been facing this pandemic bullshittery for close to 3 years now? Laugh! And occasionally cry. But mostly laugh! And that's exactly what Judd Apatow sought to do with his first movie to be made for Netflix, a Hollywood satire inspired by the unorthodox method that the latest Jurassic World movie used as one of the first movies made during COVID of keeping its actors sequestered together in a hotel, with The Bubble focusing on the dysfunctional cast and crew for the latest installment of the Cliff Beast franchise, trying to keep their sanity while making a big CGI blockbuster in the time of social distancing. And just look at the cast that Apatow put together for this flick. Nebula, The Mandalorian, Agent Mulder, Keegan Peele,
Art Carney,
Uncle Fester, Judd Apatow's wife, Judd Apatow's daughter,
Stop!
Borat's daughter, and the villain from DC League of Super Pets. What an embarrassment of riches this is. But the only embarrassment to be had here was from watching Judd Apatow's brand of improv-heavy humor drag on for over 2 hours, where narcissistic celebrities bickered and bitched about the ways of pandemic life, which we sure didn't want to hear after suffering through that same pandemic ourselves. Let me repeat that running time for you, over 2 hours long. 13 minutes longer than the movie which won Best Picture at the Oscars this year. Will somebody please hire Judd Apatow a goddamn editor already? And while the talented cast all certainly try their best, they're merely treading over the same ground as far better Hollywood parodies, in what feels more like a loose series of skits barely tied together by a flimsy plot structure than a genuine movie. And while Apatow can still be great as a director with his recent George Carlin documentary on HBO, The Bubble was merely a waste of potential for an effective and actually funny satire about our post-COVID trauma. Maybe Netflix could have uploaded a funnier Bubble-related movie instead of this one, like Bubble Boy. Number 9, Moonfall. Hasn't the world been through enough these past 2 years without yet another movie from the German master of disaster, Roland Emmerich? As hard as the Independence Day director has tried to step outside the disaster genre, he always finds a way back to destroying the Earth with excessive CGI, even after that Independence Day sequel proved to be a disaster in itself. But Emmerich somehow reached a new high of ridiculousness with his latest sci-fi opus, starring Patrick Wilson and Hallie I've clearly learned nothing after Catwoman Barry as a pair of astronauts who must save our planet from doom when the moon's orbit starts veering closer towards Earth and causing plenty of natural disasters before its oncoming collision. This is because the moon is actually an artificial megastructure that contains a swarm of malicious AI robots who use the moon as a power source and seek to destroy our planet next. And yes, this plot is based on an actual conspiracy theory about the moon, because of course it is. Even by Emmerich's lowered standards, Moonfall was way too much for audiences to take as either a genuinely fun sci-fi flick or an unintentionally funny crapfest, as it recycled pretty much all the tropes that have made up Emmerich's previous disaster films. Absent parents reuniting with their estranged children, an elderly government official who was secretly in on the world-destroying plot all along, and of course the comic relief science nerd who provides exposition and makes instantly dated references.
What would Elon do?
Wah, wah, wah.
Hey, at least he has a pet cat named Fuzz Aldrin. That's sincerely adorable. And with the movie's Chinese backers providing Emmerich with a $140 million budget that made Moonfall one of the most expensive independent movies ever made, it only managed to pull in a measly $19 million domestically after opening behind Jackass Forever, making Moonfall one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. So if Mr. Emmerich thinks that Marvel and Star Wars have led to Hollywood's current state of creative bankruptcy, perhaps he should look in the mirror before he steps behind the camera next time to deliver a hopefully far less stupid film than this disastrous disaster flick. Here's keeping our fingers crossed that Moonfall's failure will not impede production on the upcoming Buzz Aldrin spin-off movie. Number 8. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The film which we are about to discuss is another follow-up to an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths in August of 1973, known as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And ever since the late great Tobe Hooper's controversial indie classic first lit the world on fire nearly 50 years ago, there have been plenty of failed attempts to rev up Leatherface's chainsaw for a successful follow-up, aside from Hooper's underrated 1986 sequel and the decent 2003 remake. But the franchise's otherwise steady decline was furthered by its latest reboot on Netflix, produced by Don't Breathe director Fede Alvarez, that attempted the same gimmick of the latest Halloween reboot of making a straight sequel to Tobe Hooper's original film, with Leatherface revving his chainsaw back up out of his 50-year hiding spell after his caretaker grandma gets evicted from her abandoned town that's been bought up by a trio of Instagram influencers who seek to turn the town into a Gen Z paradise. If this means we'll get to see Logan Paul versus Leatherface, then sign me the fuck up. Unfortunately, this latest reboot's attempt to appeal to the youth of today felt as if it were written by a boomer screenwriter.
Try anything, you cancel, bro.
With one of the main characters battling her trauma she experienced from surviving a high school mass shooting, in a clumsy and distasteful attempt to comment on the political tumult of the 2020s in the same way the original commented on the chaos of the post-Nixon 70s. And in a further attempt to rip off the Halloween formula, Sally Hardesty is back from surviving the original movie, and now played by a new actress, to finally get her long-planned revenge on the bastard who killed her friends back in the 70s. Sound familiar? Which anticlimactically ends with Sally at the receiving end of Leatherface's chainsaw, so why did we even bother? But to be fair, the new Texas Chainsaw did go through a fractious production overseas in Bulgaria that saw the original 2 directors being dismissed and the movie getting chopped down to a mere 83 minutes after poor test screenings, before Legendary Pictures decided to dump the shit onto Netflix, where the latest entry was received just as well as the last time they tried rebooting Leatherface for the smartphone generation.
Do your thing, cuz.
So I guess there is little hope for another chainsaw-based massacre to occur in the state of Texas anytime soon. How about we just stop rebooting this franchise and instead follow the advice of Dennis Hopper Sheriff from Texas Chainsaw 2?
Bring it all down!
Number 7. Pinocchio. 2022 was the year when Carlo Collodi's classic fantasy tale got 3 brand new streaming film adaptations of wildly varying quality, beginning with the Russian CGI knockoff that went viral over Pauly Shore's queer-friendly vocal performance of the title role.
When can I leave to be on my own? I've got the whole world to see.
And ending with Guillermo del Toro's stop-motion adaptation on Netflix that garnered nearly universal acclaim. But in the middle was director Robert Zemeckis' live-action remake for Disney Plus of the studio's classic 1940 animated adaptation, which reunited Zemeckis not only with his Forrest Gump and Castaway star Tom Hanks in the role of Geppetto, but also the dead-eyed CGI animation style that Zemeckis has been obsessed with the past 20 years, even after Disney themselves mocked that animation style in the Chip and Dale movie. But the animation was the least of our problems here, with yet another heartless Disney remake that takes the beautiful simplicity of the original classic and slaps a shiny CGI skin onto it, along with pointless new characters, forgettable new songs, and even some shameless product placement for the far better Disney classics you should be streaming on Disney Plus instead of this horseshit. No, seriously, this movie has horseshit in it. What an apt metaphor! Meanwhile, Tom Hanks is completely wasted in the Geppetto role with a shaky singing voice and an even shakier Italian accent that's just as ill-fitting as his Dutch accent from Elvis.
The only thing that matters is that that man gets up on that stage tonight.
While Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Jiminy Cricket just does an impersonation of the original voice actor and doesn't even get to sing his famous signature song. Thank goodness Keegan-Michael Key is here as Honest John to liven things up with some comedy.
We need a simple, strong stage name. Chris Pine! Bitch, are you for real?
But the change they make to the original Disney ending is the biggest insult of all, where Pinocchio isn't turned into a human boy by the Blue Fairy after saving his papa's life, but Jiminy assures us that he later did so right off screen before we even got to see it. What a sad decline this is for the man who gave us Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Death Becomes Her, to now give us one of the worst remakes that Disney has made to date. My hopes aren't high for Disney Plus's next remake of Peter Pan, namely because Pauly Shore isn't playing the part of Peter. Number 6. The Munsters. This past year saw a classic 1960s sitcom about a creepy family that struggles to blend into their conservative suburban surroundings, getting a phenomenally successful reboot on Netflix from a beloved horror director. Oh wait, that was Wednesday. Got my notes mixed up here. My mistake. I'm actually talking about The Munsters, Rob Zombie's latest directorial effort that saw the man who once wrote a song about Herman Munster's drag racer now adapting the monster sitcom into an origin movie for its titular family, with the younger versions of Herman, Grandpa, and Lily Munster being played respectively by Rob Zombie cast regulars Jeff Daniel Phillips, Daniel Roebuck, and Sherry Moon Zombie. Because of course Rob Zombie will always find a way to cast his wife somewhere. But when Zombie debuted his Munster movie's first trailer on YouTube this past summer, the internet's reaction was a collective and amidst a slew of online uproar picking the trailer apart for its often indecipherable sound editing,
I can whip you up a humpy down in the land.
And a low production value that looked far below the reported $40 million budget from the movie's benefactors at Peacock, Rob Zombie had to come out and clarify the film was actually a lower budget effort that was instead releasing straight to Netflix under Universal's 1440 division, best known for straight-to-video sequels for defunct franchises that are actually just half-assed remakes. So while Zombie's love for the original show is evident behind the camera, his flaws as a filmmaker were all too evident with the movie's hyper-colored digital photography and cheap, sparse sets, with his attempts at ghoul-related jokes feeling like a dinner theater version of What We Do in the Shadows.
When they made me, they broke the mold! With you in it, I presume! No!
Fucking guy.
At an overlong 110 minutes, Rob Zombie's The Munsters proves that the best of intentions don't always make for the best of movies, and that the Munster family should perhaps stay dead for the immediate future after all these decades of failed reboots. As Herman Munster himself said in Pet Sematary,
sometimes that is better.
It's not gonna get any better.
Number 5. Firestarter. Speaking of Stephen King, the master of literary horror was popping up quite a bit in the news this past year. Not for his books, but for his back and forth with new Twitter owner Elon Musk.
Come on over here, sugar buns. This machine just called me an asshole.
But let's not forget this past year's cinematic remake of the 1980 King novel that had been previously adapted for the big screen by producer Dino De Laurentiis in 1984, starring a young Drew Barrymore as the daughter of a couple who lent their bodies out to scientific experiments in their college days, thus giving young Charlie the power to start fires telekinetically with her mind. While the 1984 Firestarter isn't one of the better remembered King adaptations, it was certainly better than the Blumhouse-produced remake that now starred Zac Efron as the father of the fire-starting Charlie McGee, who tries saving himself and his daughter from the secret government agents who want to kill Charlie before her powers become uncontrollable. Yet since we live in a time where 5 seasons worth of Stranger Things have redone all of Stephen King's 80s era tropes already, the new Firestarter felt like warmed over leftovers, which offered nothing new to the table, aside from casting the Native American role of the girl's assassin with an actual Native American this time instead of George C. Scott, and the musical score being co-composed by a certain John fucking Carpenter, the same man who lost out on directing the original Firestarter back in the 80s after the thing flopped at the box office. Well, I'm sure John was okay with staying in retirement and not also going behind the camera on this remake, after he saw the abysmal fire-starting effects that somehow look worse here than they do in the 80s. So on top of horrid reviews, Firestarter also made the fatal mistake of releasing to theaters and streaming on Peacock, much like Blumhouse did with their Halloween sequels, which caused this inferior remake to flame out badly at the box office. Let's hope that the upcoming remake of Salem's Lot can do far more justice to a Stephen King classic, and that Blumhouse finds more success with their next movie about a scary little girl.
What's wrong with you?
No.
I'm gonna scare the hell out of you.
Number 4, Jurassic World Dominion. In 2015, the inclusion of the first Jurassic World on our worst movies list caused a giant uproar from our viewers, who largely thought at the time that Colin Trevorrow's reboot of the Jurassic franchise was, in the words of Jake Johnson, legit. But by 2018, things had soured considerably with the second flick that made our list, Fallen Kingdom. So that brings us here in 2022 to the allegedly final installment of the Jurassic World/Park saga, where not only did Colin Trevorrow return to the director's seat after sitting out the last movie, as well as Episode 9, but the original 3 heroes of Spielberg's first movie have returned as well. Sam Neill as Alan Grant, Laura Dern as Ellie Sattler, and of course Jeff motherfucking Goldblum as Ian motherfucking Malcolm. Now teaming up with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard as they must deal with the fallout from the last sequel's ending. Yet instead of telling us how humans have learned to tame these blood-hungry dinosaurs over a mere 4 years, Dominion instead has our heroes trying to uncover a plot to control the world's food supply, courtesy of Dr. Lewis Dodgson from the first movie.
Dodgson! We've got Dodgson here!
Who's now become an evil CEO played by Campbell Scott after the original actor, well, let's just leave it at that. This cliched story is just one of many ways that the new Jurassic World tries playing into nostalgia for the very first movie instead of doing its own thing, while our original Jurassic actors are largely sidelined in favor of the far less interesting newer heroes. And while all credit is due to Colin Trevorrow and his crew for being the first blockbuster movie to try resuming production amidst the COVID outbreak, no amount of hand sanitizer could clean a script that was dirty with more bad dialogue and ridiculous story. By now, all the wonder and charm we felt as children seeing these dinosaurs appear on the big screen back in 1993 has been utterly worn down by this 6th installment, which at least became the 4th Jurassic movie to cross $1 billion worldwide, thus ensuring that life will likely, find a way for this franchise once again. Mr. Trevorrow, after careful consideration, we have decided not to endorse your sequel trilogy.
So have I.
Number 3, Halloween Ends. While we here at JoBlo.com are fully aware that David Gordon Green's finale for his Halloween reboot trilogy certainly has some high-profile defenders, including John Carpenter himself, the hatred that many have for Halloween Ends is as genuine as Haddonfield's hatred for Michael Myers, the masked mute psycho who returned to terrorize his hometown in the smash hit 2018 Halloween reboot from Blumhouse that brought back both Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode and John Carpenter as a consulting producer/musical composer, and ignored the events of Halloween 2 through Resurrection to instead give us a true sequel to the original movie. But because the Halloween franchise has never been one to let a good thing die, David Gordon Green would reteam with Curtis, Carpenter, and co-writer Danny McBride on 2 further sequels. And while we decided against including Halloween Kills in our 2021 Worst Movies poll, it's safe to say in retrospect that sequel gave us the most ridiculous phrase to be associated with these movies since Trick or Treat, motherfucker.
Evil dies tonight!
Shut up!
But of course, evil did not die that night, and that's where we find Michael in the very next chapter 4 years after his last killing spree, hiding out in a sewer where he comes across a misfit teenager named Corey, who like Michael has grown to be feared by the rest of Haddonfield after accidentally killing a kid he was babysitting on Halloween 2019. Thus, the weakened Michael Myers has transferred his evil onto poor Corey, who seeks to take the shape's place as the terror of Haddonfield while seeking a romance with Laurie Strode's granddaughter. As if you couldn't tell from the reused opening credits font from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, David Gordon Green clearly wants to follow in John Carpenter's footsteps of making a wildly different third installment that would likely dissatisfy the bloodthirsty fan base at first. And dissatisfied the fans were at this movie's melodramatic switch in tone that turned the Michael Myers character into a useless tool instead of a powerful monster. And much like how she was sidelined in Halloween Kills, Jamie Lee Curtis also has to play second fiddle for most of this sequel until the final fight between her and Michael Myers that the film's marketing strategy focused on arrived in the final 20 minutes, leading to an unintentionally hilarious ending for The Shape where the terrorized populace of Haddonfield throws his lifeless body into an industrial shredder.
Oops!
Yep, that ought to do it. But whether or not Halloween Ends grows to be as underappreciated as Halloween 3 was, we can all agree this likely won't be the end for this franchise, and at least Jamie Lee got to end the role that started her career on a more dignified note than her opening cameo in Halloween 8. So let's just hope the next Halloween timeline will have themselves a better planned ending, where Rob Zombie keeps his greasy hands far away from it. Number 2. Jeepers Creepers Reborn. In 2001, Jeepers Creepers became an unexpected horror hit at the box office, with its simple yet scary tale of a truck-driving ancient demon who awakens on every 23rd spring for 23 days to feast on human flesh. It certainly helped that the movie, in addition to its 2 sequels from 2003 and 2017, were written and directed by someone who is a bit of a flesh-hungry demon themselves. But aside from its problematic creator, the Jeepers Creepers franchise can certainly come back in an era when horror is one of the few genres still getting people into theaters after COVID, with Iron Sky director Timo Vuorensola making his American film debut on this 4th entry, that actually incurred a lawsuit from the previous 2 films' owners claiming they weren't even notified of this 4th film's production. And after horror fans suffered through this sequel during its limited theatrical run through Fathom Events, they were ready to file their own lawsuits against the filmmakers after watching what might very well be one of the worst horror movies in recent years. For one thing, much of the movie is filmed on green screens instead of actual sets, which they apparently had to use due to the movie's COVID-limited production. These people do know that filming in a real house isn't gonna get you sick from COVID, right? As for the titular creeper, not only is he a different guy from the first 3 movies, but his makeup looks more like the haunted fucking Mask. And to top it all off, the movie has obscene product placement for the Horror Hound fan convention that does as much for their reputation as Jaws 3D did for SeaWorld's. When even the Halloween sequel is able to get a cameo from Darcy the Mail Girl, yet you can't book her for a horror sequel that's actually set at a horror fan convention, then you have done something horrifically wrong, much like this franchise's creator. Fuck you. Despite a welcome opening cameo from both Dee Wallace and the guy from Alien Nation, this unofficial sequel/reboot truly has us hoping this Reborn franchise remains stillborn for a long time to come. Jeepers Creepers. This shitty sequel will bring tears to your weepers. And now for JoBlo.com's #1 worst movie of 2022. In the words of the late great Jason David Frank, right, Morbid time! Number 1. Morbius. Despite some fatigue from audiences, Marvel Studios and their cinematic universe are still as big of a pop culture phenomenon as ever before. So who could blame Sony for exploiting their custody deal with the MCU over the rights to Spider-Man with their very own Spider-Man cinematic universe? Especially after No Way Home proved that their Spider-Verse could coexist and cross over with Disney's Marvelverse while breaking box office records in the process. But the multiversal chaos unleashed by Doctor Strange was nothing compared to the mess left behind by Morbius, Sony's latest Spidey spin-off that focused on Michael Morbius, a sickly blood doctor who, after splicing his genes with bat DNA, turns himself into a living vampire who thirsts for blood and has the power to, I don't know, morb? And even though Jared Leto's last turn as a comic book villain didn't turn out so good, he brought his method acting genius to the titular role of Morbius, alongside Jared Harris as his Alfred-esque mentor, Tyrese Gibson as the cop who's hot on the vampire's trail, and Matt Smith as his dear friend Milo, who also undergoes the same blood transfusion so he can use his vampire powers to prepare facing off against Bully Maguire in a dance-off. Between the dopey script, the bloodless PG-13 vampire carnage, and the below-par CGI, Morbius felt more like a superhero movie you would see in 2005 than in 2022. And we owe an apology to Tom Hardy's Venom after hearing Jared Leto's weak attempts at badass superhero wisecracks.
I'm starting to get hungry. You don't want to see me when I'm hungry.
Hell, not even She-Hulk could get Kevin Feige to explain how the movie's infamous end credit stinger ties this crap into the larger MCU, where Michael Keaton as the Vulture materializes into prison in Morbius' universe, then immediately gets let out of prison after they can't find his name on the books, and somehow gets his Vulture suit back on to meet with Dr. Morbius about dealing with your friendly, not appearing in this film, Spider-Man. So after Morbius underwhelmed at the box office, Sony had the bright idea to cash in on the film's status as an ironic internet meme with a theatrical re-release, where the movie bombed for a second time and Sony quickly pulled it out of theaters.
It's just dumb.
Let's just hope that Marvel rethinks the level of creative control that Sony has over this Spider-Verse of theirs for the sake of the upcoming Spider-Verse sequels and future Avengers installments, and that Dr. Morbius stays buried deep within the multiverse of madness after starring in JoBlo.com's worst movie of 2022. Oh well, at least Michael Keaton will surely find more success when he comes back as Batman over in the DCU. Oh, wait. That's right. I'm Jesse Shade for JoBlo.com, and thanks to all of you who either voted for or watched our list of the worst movies of 2022. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the JoBlo Originals channel. Tell all your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company that appreciates all of your support. And though we've said goodbye to the cinematic boogeymen of 2022, the truth is that bad movies never die. They merely change shape.
I'll be back.
Ooh, shit.
Holy shit.
The devil,
He's coming back.
the devil,
He's coming back.
the devil,
He's coming back.
the devil.
He's coming.
He's back, and he's on a rampage like a madman after a crowd with a 12-gauge shotgun. But this one's the terrible ruler of hell.
Don't you dare touch that dial.